The howling wind clawed at Marianne Parker's cloak as she pounded on the massive wooden gates of Wallace, Idaho, her knuckles raw and bleeding in the frigid November air of 1887. The blizzard had descended without warning, transforming the mountainous landscape into a whirling maelstrom of white death that had already claimed the lives of her wagon driver and his assistant. "Please," she screamed, her voice swallowed by the storm. "For the love of God, open the gates." Marianne's fingers, numb with cold, slipped from the rough-hewn timber as she sank to her knees in the rapidly accumulating snow. Her journey west from Boston had been fraught with hardship, but nothing had prepared her for the brutality of an Idaho winter in the mountains. The last mile to Wallace had been traversed on foot after the wagon axle had broken, and her companions had fallen to the merciless cold one by one. Just as consciousness began to slip away, the sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the howling wind. Through half-frozen eyelashes, she glimpsed a tall figure on horseback materializing from the swirling white. "Madam, good Lord, what are you doing out here?" The man dismounted in one fluid motion, kneeling beside her. Beneath a wide-brimmed hat crusted with snow, intense blue eyes assessed her condition with alarming efficiency. "Town, close the gates," she managed through chattering teeth. "Please, help me." "I'm Adam Jensen," he said, scooping her up as if she weighed nothing. "And you're not dying in this storm tonight, madam. Not on my watch." Adam settled her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, enveloping her in warmth as he wrapped his heavy buffalo hide coat around them both. His strong arms reached around her to grasp the reins, and she found herself leaning back against his solid chest, the steady beat of his heart a reassuring rhythm against her back. "My cabin's not far," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "The town's sealed up tight against the storm. Sheriff has a policy during blizzards like this: no opening after sundown. Too many outlaws have used storms as cover." Marianne wanted to protest, to explain that she had traveled over 2,000 miles to reach Wallace, that everything she owned in the world was in her trunk at the stage-coach station, but the words froze in her throat. Instead, she surrendered to the gentle rocking motion of the horse and the blessed heat of the man behind her. The journey seemed both endless and fleeting. Through the veil of snow, a small log cabin emerged, its windows glowing with warm light. Adam dismounted and carried her inside, setting her carefully before a crackling fire. "You're safe now, Miss Parker." "Marianne Parker," she replied, her voice barely audible as warmth began returning painful sensation to her extremities. Adam nodded, moving with efficient purpose around the cabin. He hung his snow-crusted coat by the door, revealing broad shoulders beneath a faded blue shirt. His face, now visible in the firelight, bore the weathered lines of a man who lived under the open sky, but his features were handsome beneath several days' growth of beard. "Miss Parker, I need to check you for frostbite. I promise to be a gentleman." With gentle hands, he removed her sodden boots and examined her feet. The pain was excruciating as blood flowed back into her toes, but his touch was clinical and respectful. "You're lucky," he pronounced after examining her hands and face as well. "No black spots. Caught you just in time." He rose and moved to a pot bubbling on the iron stove. "Stew's hot. You need to warm from the inside, too." Marianne watched him through the steam rising from the bowl he handed her. "Thank you, Mr. Jensen. I fear I would have died out there." "Adam," he corrected, settling into a worn chair across from her. "And yes, you would have. What brings a lady like yourself to Wallace in the dead of winter?" Marianne hesitated, the spoon halfway to her mouth. The stew was rich with tender chunks of venison and root vegetables, the most delicious thing she'd tasted in weeks. "My uncle," she said finally. Samuel Parker. He owned the Silver Crescent mine. I received word he died last month. I've come to settle his affairs." Adam's expression darkened. "Sam Parker was your uncle. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Parker. He was a good man." "You knew him?" Marianne leaned forward eagerly. Everyone in these parts knew Sam. He was fair with his men, generous with his fortune. His death, it hit the town hard. The letter said it was an accident in the mine. Adam's eyes flickered to the window, where the storm continued to rage. That's the official story. A chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard crept up Marianne's spine. And the unofficial story. This isn't the time for such talk. "You need rest." He stood, gathering blankets from a trunk. "Take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire." Marianne wanted to press him for more information, but exhaustion was overtaking her in waves. "I cannot displace you from your own bed, Mr. Jensen." "Adam," he reminded her with a small smile. "And you're not displacing me. I sleep out here half the time anyway." He gestured to a well-worn book on the side table. "Gets too quiet otherwise." Marianne noticed for the first time the neat row of books on a shelf above the fireplace, not what she would have expected in a cowboy's cabin. "You're a reader. When the snow flies, there's not much else to do." He helped her to her feet. "The bedroom's through there. I've got some clothes that might fit you, old shirts and such. They're clean." The small bedroom was simply furnished but neat. A colorful quilt covered the narrow bed, and a small window looked out onto the snowbound landscape, now invisible in the darkness. "Thank you, Adam. I'm in your debt." "No debt between neighbors," he said, then paused. "Though I suppose you're not a neighbor yet." He hesitated at the door. "I'll be right outside if you need anything. Don't worry about the storm. This cabin's weathered worse." After he closed the door, Marianne changed into the offered clothing, a soft flannel shirt that hung to her knees. Her own dress, heavy with melted snow, she hung carefully over a chair to dry. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Her mind buzzed with questions about her uncle, about Adam Jensen, and about what awaited her in Wallace. She had left everything behind in Boston, a respectable teaching position, a comfortable if lonely existence, and the persistent attentions of the school headmaster, whose proposal she had declined 3 times. The letter about her uncle's death had provided not just the obligation, but the opportunity to escape. Samuel Parker had been her father's younger brother, the black sheep who had headed west in search of fortune and actually found it. Now she was his only living relative, and according to the letter from the Wallace bank manager, the sole inheritor of his considerable estate. It seemed impossible that, after years of careful frugality, she might suddenly be wealthy. Lulled by the sound of the fire crackling in the next room and the steady howl of the wind outside, Marianne finally drifted into sleep, dreaming of silver mountains and blue eyes the color of a summer sky. Dawn broke with blinding brilliance, sunlight reflecting off pristine snow. Marianne woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Her muscles protested as she rose, stiff from the previous day's ordeal, but she was alive thanks to the man she could hear moving about in the main room. After dressing in her now dry clothes, she emerged to find Adam setting 2 plates on a rough-hewn table. "Morning," he greeted her. "Thought you might sleep till noon. Storm's broken, but we've got about 4 feet of new snow. Town'll be digging out for a day or 2. Marianne took in the sight of him in daylight. His dark hair was tied back at the nape of his neck, and he'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline and the faint scar that ran along his left cheek. He wore a clean shirt, suspenders, and worn denim trousers tucked into high boots. He looked younger than she'd thought last night, perhaps 30 to her 26 years. "I'm accustomed to rising early," she said, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. "I was a teacher in Boston." "That explains it, then." At her questioning look, he elaborated. Your way of speaking, your bearing, figured you for educated, and you, she asked, surprised at her own boldness. You're not what I expected of a. She hesitated. Cowboy, he supplied with a slight smile. I've been called worse, but I'm not exactly a cowboy, at least not anymore. I run cattle in the summer months, but these days I make most of my living as a scout and guide. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Marianne returned to the subject that had been occupying her thoughts. Last night, you suggested my uncle's death might not have been an accident. Adam set down his fork. Miss Parker, Marianne, please. If I'm to call you Adam, you must use my Christian name, he nodded. Marianne, your uncle was a careful man who knew mines better than most. The story that he accidentally triggered a cave-in doesn't sit right with a lot of folks. There were tensions in town before his death. What kind of tensions? Adam rose, refilling their coffee cups. The Silver Crescent is the richest mine in the district. Your uncle found a new vein last fall, one that could produce for decades. There are powerful men who wanted to buy him out. When he refused, he shrugged. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Are you suggesting murder? I'm suggesting you be careful. Wallace looks like a civilized town, but there's a lot of money at stake in those hills, and men will do terrible things for silver. Marianne felt a chill. Who would want to harm me? I'm just here to settle his estate. What exactly does settling his estate mean to you? She frowned. I assumed I would sell the mine, of course. I know nothing about mining. The bank manager's letter mentioned several interested parties. Let me guess, was one of them Cornelius Blackridge? At her nod, Adam's expression hardened. Blackridge Mining is buying up every claim they can. They don't take no for an answer. Are you suggesting I shouldn't sell to them? I'm suggesting you don't make any decisions until you understand what you're selling. Sam Parker didn't just leave you a mine. He left you his life's work and the livelihood of over 100 miners and their families. The weight of responsibility settled on Marianne's shoulders. She had come to Wallace thinking only of a brief transaction that would fund her return east, perhaps to open the small school for girls she had always dreamed of. Now she realized the situation was far more complex. Will you help me? She asked suddenly. I know nothing of this place, these people. I need someone I can trust. Adam studied her for a long moment. You don't know me well enough to trust me. You saved my life, she said simply. And you were my uncle's friend. A shadow crossed his face. I owed Sam Parker a debt I can never repay. If helping you honors his memory, then yes, I'll help you. Later that morning, they prepared to make the journey into town. The sky was a piercing blue, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. Adam led a second horse from his small barn, a gentle-looking mare. This is Daisy, he said as he helped Marianne mount. She'll take care of you. The ride into Wallace was breathtaking. The mountains rose on all sides, their snow-capped peaks gleaming in the sunlight. The town itself nestled in a narrow valley, smoke rising from chimneys, the streets already bustling with activity as residents dug out from the storm. As they approached the gates now standing open, Marianne thought of the previous night's desperation. Without Adam, she would be lying beneath the snow, another victim of the mountain's cruel beauty. The sheriff will want to know about the stagecoach, Adam said as they rode through the gates. Your driver and the others. Their families should be notified. Marianne nodded, her throat tight. They were kind to me on the journey. Mr. Davis, the driver, told me stories of when this was all wilderness. He had been making the run for 20 years. Adam led them down the main street, a wide thoroughfare lined with substantial buildings of brick and timber. Wallace was clearly a prosperous mining town, with none of the rough-hewn temporariness she had expected. There were shops, a hotel, even a small opera house. People turned to stare at them as they passed, and Marianne realized how she must look a strange woman riding beside Adam Jensen. "Folks are curious," Adam said, noting her discomfort. "News travels fast in a town this size. By nightfall, everyone will know Sam Parker's niece has arrived." They stopped first at the sheriff's office, a tidy building adjoining the town jail. Sheriff Tate was a barrel-chested man with a magnificent mustache and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened gravely to the tale of the stagecoach and promised to send men out to recover the bodies as soon as the mountain pass was navigable. "Miss Parker," he said when she had finished her account, "I'm mighty sorry about your uncle. He was a fine man, and we're all poorer for his passing." His eyes flicked to Adam. "Jensen treating you all right?" "Mr. Jensen saved my life, Sheriff. I would have perished at your gates without his intervention." The sheriff nodded. "He's good in a pinch, I'll give him that." There was something in his tone Marianne couldn't quite identify, not disapproval exactly, but caution. "You planning to stay in town now?" "Yes." "I understand my uncle kept rooms above the assay office. Nice apartments. I'll have someone take you there after you've had a chance to get settled." He hesitated. "Miss Parker, there's been some interest in your uncle's affairs since his passing. The bank has papers for you, and there are several gentlemen in town eager to discuss the mine." "I'm sure they can wait another day, Sheriff," Adam interjected. "Miss Parker has been through an ordeal." Sheriff Tate shrugged. "Just letting the lady know. Wallace is a friendly town, Miss Parker, but business is business." Their next stop was the Silver Palace Hotel, where Marianne's trunk had been delivered from the stagecoach office. The hotel owner, Mrs. Holloway, a plump woman with twinkling eyes and iron-gray hair, clucked sympathetically over Marianne's ordeal. "My stars, child, what a welcome to our town. You come right upstairs and have a hot bath before you do anything else." She shot Adam a suspicious look. "You can wait in the lobby, Mr. Jensen." The hot bath was heavenly, and the clean clothes from her trunk made Marianne feel human again. When she descended to the lobby, she found Adam engaged in tense conversation with a tall, elegantly dressed man. They fell silent as she approached. "Ah, Miss Parker," the stranger said, extending his hand. "I'm Cornelius Blackridge. I had business with your late uncle, and I'm eager to continue that relationship with you." Blackridge was perhaps 50, with silver hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to power. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Mr. Blackridge," Marianne acknowledged, "I understand you've expressed interest in my uncle's mine." "Indeed. Blackridge Mining can offer you a very generous price, far more than the property is worth to someone with no experience in the industry. I'd be happy to discuss details over dinner this evening." Before Marianne could respond, Adam stepped forward. "Miss Parker has only just arrived in town, Mr. Blackridge. Perhaps business discussions can wait until she's had time to review her uncle's affairs." Blackridge's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Of course, I wouldn't want to rush such important decisions." He turned back to Marianne. "The offer stands, Miss Parker, whenever you're ready." With a slight bow, he departed. "He seems pleasant enough," Marianne observed as they watched him leave. "Rattlesnakes often do right before they strike," Adam replied grimly. "Blackridge has been trying to get his hands on the Silver Crescent for years. Your uncle refused every offer. Because the mine is valuable. More valuable than Blackridge is letting on. But that's not why Sam refused to sell." Adam took her elbow, guiding her toward the hotel restaurant. "Let's get you some food and I'll tell you about your uncle." Over a hearty meal of venison stew and fresh bread, Adam painted a picture of Samuel Parker that both aligned with and contradicted the image Marianne had carried since childhood. Yes, he had been adventurous and independent, as she remembered, but he had also become a pillar of the Wallace community, beloved by the miners who worked his claim. He paid fair wages, better than any other mine owner, Adam explained. He built housing for the workers' families, brought in a doctor when the fever swept through last winter. When Blackridge started buying claims and cutting wages, Sam stood against him. The Silver Crescent became a symbol of resistance. "My uncle sounds like a different man than the one who left Boston 20 years ago," Marianne mused. "My father always spoke of him as reckless, irresponsible. People change. The mountains have a way of revealing what's truly inside a man." Adam's gaze was distant. "Your uncle saved my life, you know. Found me half dead in a snowstorm much like the one last night. I'd been shot by claim jumpers left for dead." "Is that how you got the scar?" Marianne asked softly. Adam's hand unconsciously touched his cheek. "Yes. Sam nursed me back to health, gave me work when I could stand again. I was his foreman for 5 years before I struck out on my own. He was the closest thing to a father I ever had." "I wish I had known him better," Marianne said, feeling a sense of loss for the man she had never really known. After lunch, they visited the bank, where Mr. Fenton, a nervous man with spectacles that constantly slid down his nose, presented her with a stack of documents. "Your uncle's will is quite clear, Miss Parker. The Silver Crescent mine, his home, and all associated properties pass to you. There is also a substantial sum in this bank, approximately $50,000. Marianne blinked at the figure. It was more money than she could comprehend. "There are, however, certain conditions," Mr. Fenton continued, shuffling papers. "Mr. Parker stipulated that you must maintain ownership of the mine for at least 1 year before any sale can be considered. He wanted you to understand the business fully before making such a decision." "A year," Marianne's head spun. She had planned to be in Wallace for a week, perhaps 2. "Your uncle was quite insistent," Mr. Fenton said apologetically. "He also designated a trustee to assist you during this period." He glanced at Adam. "Mr. Jensen, in fact." Adam looked as surprised as Marianne felt. "Sam never mentioned this to me." "The document was updated just 2 weeks before his death," Mr. Fenton explained. "He seemed concerned about something." Marianne's thoughts whirled. A year in Wallace, a fortune at stake, and the man beside her, a virtual stranger despite their intense connection, appointed as her guide. "There's more," Mr. Fenton said, adjusting his spectacles. "Your uncle left a letter for you. He instructed that it be given to you privately." He handed Marianne a sealed envelope. Her name was written on the front in a bold, confident hand. She slipped it into her reticule, aware of Adam's curious gaze. "I'll need time to review everything," she told Mr. Fenton. "Can we continue tomorrow?" "Of course, Miss Parker. I've taken the liberty of having your uncle's house prepared for your arrival. The housekeeper, Mrs. Donovan, has been maintaining it since the accident." Outside the bank, Marianne turned to Adam. "Did you know about any of this? The conditions of the will, your role as trustee?" He shook his head. "I'm as surprised as you are. Sam and I were close, but he never mentioned leaving me any responsibility for the mine. Truth be told, we'd had some disagreements in recent months about how to handle the pressure from Blackridge." "What kind of disagreements?" Adam hesitated. "Sam wanted to stand firm, refuse all offers. I thought he should consider selling not to Blackridge, but maybe to the miners themselves as a cooperative. It caused a rift between us. We hadn't spoken for almost a month before he died." The regret in his voice was palpable. Marianne found herself wanting to comfort him but unsure how. Instead, she changed the subject. "Will you show me the mine?" "Not today," Adam said, glancing at the sky. "It's a fair ride up the mountain and the snow will make the trail treacherous. Tomorrow, if the weather holds." Instead, he took her to her uncle's home, a handsome two-story structure on the hill above town. Built of sturdy logs with a wide porch, it offered a commanding view of Wallace and the surrounding mountains. Inside, it was a curious blend of frontier practicality and unexpected refinement. Bookshelves lined the walls of the study, filled with volumes on geology, mining, and literature. A piano stood in the corner of the parlor. Photographs and small mementos spoke of a life well lived. Mrs. Donovan, a stout woman with a kind face, greeted them warmly. "Miss Parker, we've been expecting you. Such a terrible business with the stage coach, the whole town's talking about it. And you, Mr. Jensen, bringing her in from the cold, just like something from a novel." She ushered them into the warm kitchen, insisting on preparing tea despite Marianne's protests that they had just eaten. "Your uncle was so proud when he got your letter saying you were coming for a visit," Mrs. Donovan continued as she bustled about. "Wouldn't stop talking about his clever niece, the teacher from Boston. Had me air out the blue bedroom and everything." Marianne's heart tightened. "He knew I was coming, but I only decided to travel after I received news of his death." Mrs. Donovan stopped, teapot in hand. "Well, that's odd. He definitely said his niece Marianne was coming to visit. Said it was all arranged. That was about 3 weeks before the accident." Adam and Marianne exchanged glances. "Mrs. Donovan, did my uncle seem worried about anything in those last weeks?" Marianne asked. The housekeeper considered this as she poured the tea. "Not worried exactly, more determined. He was working late hours, meeting with people I'd never seen before. The night before he died, he was up till dawn in that study writing letters." She nodded toward the adjoining room. "After tea, Mrs. Donovan showed Marianne to her bedroom, a lovely space with windows facing the mountains and a blue quilt that matched the color of the sky. When she returned downstairs, she found Adam examining the bookshelves in the study. "Your uncle had good taste in literature," he commented, running his finger along the leather-bound spines. "Emerson, Thoreau, Shakespeare." "Adam," Marianne said quietly, "do you think my uncle suspected he was in danger?" He turned to face her. "I think Samuel Parker was too smart not to recognize the risks he was taking by standing against Blackridge, but he wasn't a man to back down from a fight. The letter Mr. Fenton gave me." She withdrew it from her reticule. "I'm almost afraid to read it. Would you like privacy?" She shook her head. "Please stay." With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Her uncle's handwriting was bold and clear. "My dear Marianne, if you are reading this, then my suspicions have proven correct, and I have not lived to welcome you to Wallace. First, let me express my regret for involving you in matters that may prove dangerous. I had no right to make you my heir without warning you of the consequences, but time is short, and I trust you have inherited your father's courage along with his stubborn principles. The Silver Crescent is more than just a mine. It represents hope for the working men of this district against the monopolizing forces that would reduce them to servitude. Cornelius Blackridge is not merely a businessman, he is a tyrant who views miners as expendable tools in his quest for wealth. I have refused to sell to him not out of stubbornness, but because I have seen the conditions in his other operations. Men die needlessly while he dines in luxury, but there is more at stake than principle. The new vein we discovered last autumn is unlike anything seen in these mountains before. The assayers estimate its value at several $1,000,000. Blackridge knows this, though he pretends otherwise in his offers. I have named Adam Jensen as your trustee because he is the only man in Wallace I trust completely. He may not agree with all my methods, but his heart is true. Listen to him, but make your own decisions. In the cellar behind the wine rack, you will find a locked strongbox. The key is hidden in the hollow leg of my desk in the study. Inside are documents that provide evidence of Blackridge's crimes, including bribery of officials and the deliberate collapsing of a competitor's mine that killed 17 men. I have been gathering this evidence for months, working with a federal marshal who has promised to bring charges once the case is complete. Be careful, my dear niece. Trust few and watch your back. I regret placing this burden on you, but I believe you are stronger than perhaps even you know. With love and faith, your Uncle Samuel. P.S. If I truly did die in a mine accident, I'll eat my hat in heaven. I've been working those tunnels for 20 years without so much as a stubbed toe. Marianne lowered the letter, her hands shaking. He was murdered. Adam's face was grim. It seems your uncle thought so. We need to find that strongbox. Together they descended to the cellar, a cool space lined with shelves of preserved foods and, as Samuel had mentioned, a small wine rack. Adam moved it aside, revealing a metal strongbox bolted to the stone wall. Using the key they had retrieved from the desk, Marianne opened it. Inside were folders of documents, newspaper clippings, and several sworn affidavits. Most damning was a letter signed by Blackridge himself, instructing his foreman to make the necessary arrangements to ensure that Parker's stubbornness does not continue to impede our progress. The letter was dated just 3 days before Samuel Parker's death. "This is evidence of conspiracy to commit murder," Adam said softly. "With this, we could bring Blackridge down. The federal marshal my uncle mentioned, do you know who it might be?" Adam shook his head. Sam kept that close to his chest, but there's a U.S. Marshal's office in Boise. We could send a telegram. Marianne studied the documents. We need more than just this letter. We need to understand everything my uncle was working on. These affidavits from former Blackridge miners about safety violations, the financial records showing bribes, it's all part of a larger case. "You sound like a lawyer, not a school teacher," Adam said with grudging admiration. "My father was a judge," Marianne replied. "I grew up listening to him discuss cases at the dinner table." She looked up at Adam. "We need to continue my uncle's work. Not just for justice, but for the miners and their families. If Blackridge gains control of the Silver Crescent, what happens to them?" "Nothing good," Adam said grimly. "Wage cuts, longer hours, fewer safety measures. The Silver Crescent is the last major independent operation in the district. Once it falls, Blackridge will have a monopoly." They spent the afternoon reviewing the documents, piecing together Samuel Parker's investigation. By evening, Marianne's head throbbed with information, and her heart ached for the uncle. She had never really known a man of principle who had died fighting for justice. Mrs. Donovan insisted on preparing dinner, a hearty roast with potatoes and carrots from the root cellar. As they ate in the cozy dining room, Marianne found herself studying Adam across the table. In just 24 hours, he had transformed from a stranger to her most trusted ally. There was something about his steady presence that calmed her, even as the dangers surrounding her uncle's legacy became increasingly clear. "Tell me about yourself," she said suddenly. "Not just your connection to my uncle, but who you were before Wallace." Adam seemed surprised by the question. He set down his fork, considering. "Not much to tell. Born in Missouri to a farmer and his wife. Lost them both to typhoid when I was 12. Worked my way west, did what I had to do to survive. Cowboying, scouting for the army, some prospecting. Came to Wallace in '78, met your uncle and found a home of sorts. No family, none living," he said simply. "And you never married?" The question slipped out before she could consider its propriety. A shadow crossed his face. "Once, almost. Her name was Rebecca. She was the daughter of a mine owner over in Montana Territory. We were engaged for a season, but—" he shrugged. She decided a man with dirt under his nails wasn't what she wanted after all. "I'm sorry," Marianne said softly. He gave a small smile. "Ancient history now. What about you?" "No husband waiting in Boston. No, I had offers, but none that promised more than comfortable servitude." She twisted the napkin in her lap. "Teaching gave me independence, limited though it was. I couldn't bear to exchange that for marriage to a man who viewed me as property." "Your uncle would have understood that feeling," Adam said. "He valued independence above all else." Later, as they sat before the fire in the parlor, Marianne found herself reluctant for the evening to end. Tomorrow would bring a visit to the mine, more investigations, and inevitable confrontation with Blackridge. Tonight, in the warm glow of the hearth, she could almost pretend she was simply visiting her uncle's home, getting to know his friend Adam under normal circumstances. "Will you stay here tonight?" she asked. "There are plenty of rooms, and after everything we've discovered, I'd feel safer." Adam hesitated. "People will talk. A woman alone with a man who isn't family." "People already are talking, I'm sure," Marianne said with a small smile. "The stranger who arrived in a blizzard, rescued by the handsome scout. Mrs. Donovan probably has the whole town at her by now." A flush crept up Adam's neck at the word handsome. "Mrs. Donovan does have a way with a story," he admitted. "All right, I'll stay. But in the guest room downstairs, so there can be no question of propriety." As Marianne prepared for bed, she found herself thinking of Adam's blue eyes, the strength in his hands as he helped her from her horse, the low timbre of his laugh when she'd made a wry observation about Blackridge's pompous manner. It was foolish to develop feelings for a man she'd known for only a day, especially under such dire circumstances, but she couldn't deny the connection between them. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams filled with swirling snow and dark tunnels that led deeper and deeper into the mountain's heart. Morning dawned clear and cold. After breakfast, Adam and Marianne rode up the winding trail to the Silver Crescent mine. The operation was larger than Marianne had expected. A complex of buildings surrounded the main shaft entrance, with a rail line carrying ore cars to the crushing mill below. Dozens of men moved purposefully around the site, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Jacob Miller, the mine foreman who had taken over after Adam's departure, greeted them with obvious relief. A stocky man with enormous mustaches and intelligent eyes, he pumped Marianne's hand enthusiastically. "Miss Parker, we've been wondering when you'd arrive. The men will be mighty glad to meet Sam's niece." News of their arrival spread quickly, and soon miners were emerging from the tunnels and gathering around. Marianne was touched by their genuine affection for her uncle and their ready acceptance of her as his heir. "Your uncle was one of us," Jacob explained as he led them on a tour of the surface operations. "Never put on airs, never asked a man to do something he wouldn't do himself. The day he died, he was down in the new section with the blasting crew, checking the supports himself." "Can you show us where it happened?" Marianne asked. Jacob exchanged a glance with Adam. "It's safe enough now, we've retimbered the whole section. But are you sure you want to see it, madam? It's not a pretty place." "I need to understand how my uncle died," she said firmly. Equipped with heavy coats, lanterns, and hard hats, they descended into the mine. The main tunnel was wide and well supported, with rail tracks running down the center for the ore cars. Side tunnels branched off at intervals, some active with the sounds of picks and shovels, others dark and abandoned. As they went deeper, the air grew cooler and thick with mineral scents. Water dripped from the ceiling in places, and the walls glittered with quartz and occasional flecks of silver. Despite the claustrophobic conditions, Marianne found herself fascinated by the underground world. "This is the main shaft," Jacob explained. We're about 400 feet down now. The new vein your uncle discovered is another 100 feet below in a side tunnel. They descended further, finally turning into a narrow passageway that showed signs of recent work. New timber supports gleamed in the lantern light, contrasting with the older, weathered wood in the main shaft. "This is where it happened," Jacob said, stopping in a widened area where the tunnel forked. "Your uncle was checking the support beams here when the charge went off prematurely. This whole section collapsed." Marianne stared at the massive timbers, trying to imagine the horror of being trapped beneath tons of rock and earth. "How long did it take to reach him?" "Too long," Jacob said quietly. "We dug for hours, but by the time we got to him—" He shook his head. Adam moved forward, examining the new supports with a critical eye. "Who set the charges that day?" "New fellow, name of Whitman. Came on about a month before it happened. Haven't seen him since. Figured he couldn't face the men after what happened." Adam and Marianne exchanged significant glances. "This Whitman," Marianne asked, "what did he look like?" Jacob scratched his beard. "Tall, thin fellow. Spoke with a bit of an accent, maybe Southern. Kept to himself mostly. Said he'd worked mines in Colorado." "And he just disappeared after the accident," Adam pressed. "Left the same day. Sheriff questioned him but said there wasn't evidence of anything but carelessness. Happens in mines." Jacob looked between them. "Why? You thinking there was something more to it?" Marianne chose her words carefully. "We're looking into all aspects of my uncle's death. Tell me, Jacob, what do the men think about Cornelius Blackridge's interest in the mine?" Jacob's face darkened. "Blackridge is a vulture. His mines work men to death for half the wages Sam paid. If he gets the Silver Crescent, half the families in Wallace will be destitute within a year." "That won't happen," Marianne said firmly. "My uncle made certain of that in his will." Relief washed over Jacob's weathered features. "That's good news, Miss Parker." "The men have been worried sick, especially with Blackridge strutting around town like he already owns the place." They spent the rest of the morning touring the mine, with Jacob explaining the operations and introducing Marianne to the miners. By the time they emerged into the sunlight, she had a newfound appreciation for her uncle's world and the men who shared it. As they rode back toward town, Adam was unusually quiet, his brow furrowed in thought. "What is it?" Marianne asked. "I'm thinking about this Whitman character. A new miner who arrives shortly before Sam's death, sets the fatal charges and disappears immediately after. It's too convenient. You think he was hired by Blackridge to kill my uncle. It fits. The question is, can we prove it?" Adam reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her. "Marianne, I need to be clear about something. If we pursue this, if we try to bring Blackridge to justice, we're putting ourselves in danger. The man has power, money, and no scruples about using both." Marianne met his gaze steadily. "My uncle died fighting him. I won't dishonor his memory by backing down now." Something shifted in Adam's eyes, respect, admiration, and something warmer. "You're a lot like Sam, stubborn as a mule when you believe in something." "I'll take that as a compliment," she said with a smile. "It was meant as one." He hesitated. "There's a telegram office in Wallace. We should wire the marshal's office in Boise today, see if they know anything about Sam's contact." They continued down the mountain, the valley spreading below them in a panorama of rugged beauty. Marianne found herself wondering what it would be like to stay in this place, to make a life among these mountains and the people who called them home. It was a far cry from the prim streets of Boston, but there was something about Wallace that spoke to a part of her she hadn't known existed. In town, they separated briefly, Adam to send the telegram, Marianne to meet with Mr. Fenton again regarding her uncle's financial affairs. They agreed to reconvene at the Silver Palace Hotel for lunch. When Marianne entered the hotel dining room, she was surprised to find Cornelius Blackridge seated alone at a table, apparently waiting for her. "Miss Parker," he said, rising smoothly. "I hoped I might catch you. Please join me for lunch." Mindful of the need to maintain appearances until they had solid evidence against him, Marianne reluctantly agreed. "Just until Mr. Jensen arrives," she stipulated. Blackridge's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. I understand you visited the Silver Crescent this morning." "A fascinating operation, isn't it? Though rather primitive by modern standards." "I found it quite impressive," Marianne countered. "The men seem well trained and dedicated. Loyal to your uncle, certainly, but sentiment doesn't extract silver from the earth efficiently." Blackridge leaned forward. "Miss Parker, I'll be direct. I want to buy the Silver Crescent. My latest offer is $100,000, twice what the mine is worth by any reasonable valuation." Marianne maintained her composure. "That's a generous offer, Mr. Blackridge. Unfortunately, my uncle's will prevent me from selling the mine for at least a year." Anger flashed across Blackridge's face before he controlled it. "Surely there's some way around such a technicality. Wills can be challenged, provisions reinterpreted." "I intend to honor my uncle's wishes," Marianne said firmly. Blackridge's voice lowered. "Miss Parker, you strike me as an intelligent woman. You must realize that mining is a dangerous business. Accidents happen. As your uncle discovered, it would be a shame if more misfortunes were to occur while you delay the inevitable." The threat hung in the air between them. Before Marianne could respond, Adam appeared at the table, his expression thunderous. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. "Perfectly fine," Blackridge said smoothly, rising. "Miss Parker and I were just discussing business." He tipped his hat. "Consider my offer, Miss Parker. It won't be available indefinitely." As he walked away, Adam took the vacated seat. "What did he say to you?" he demanded in a low voice. Marianne related the conversation, including the veiled threat. Adam's jaw tightened. "He's getting desperate. That's good and bad. Good because it means he's worried, bad because desperate men take risks." "Did you send the telegram?" Adam nodded, and received a reply almost immediately. "There's a Marshal Donovan arriving on tomorrow's stage from Boise. Apparently, your uncle had been working with him for months building a case against Blackridge. The telegram said only that he has critical information and that we should trust no one until he arrives. So we wait until tomorrow. We keep our eyes open and stay together," Adam said firmly. "I don't trust Blackridge not to try something now that he knows you won't sell easily." That afternoon, they returned to Samuel Parker's house to continue examining his papers. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Marianne found herself standing at the study window, watching the transformation. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "I never imagined the West would be so magnificent." Adam joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "It gets in your blood," he said. "The space, the freedom, even the danger has its appeal. I can see why my uncle stayed." She turned to look up at him. "And why you did." Their eyes met, and Marianne felt a current pass between them, powerful and undeniable. For a moment, she thought he might bend down, might close the distance between them, but a sharp knock at the front door broke the spell. Mrs. Donovan appeared in the doorway. "Sheriff Tate is here to see you both. Says it's urgent." The sheriff looked troubled as he entered the study, declining Mrs. Donovan's offer of coffee. "Miss Parker, Jensen, we've got a problem. Jacob Miller was attacked on his way home from the mine tonight. He's alive, but badly hurt." Marianne gasped. "Is he going to recover?" "Doc says he should pull through, but he took a severe beating. Before he lost consciousness, he said his attackers warned him to stay out of Parker business. They were wearing masks, but Jacob thought he recognized one of them as Blackridge's foreman. Adam's expression hardened. Blackridge is sending a message. Maybe, the sheriff said cautiously, but without proof, I can't make any arrests. Miss Parker, I'm concerned for your safety. Perhaps you should consider leaving Wallace until this situation resolves itself. I'm not going anywhere, Sheriff, Marianne said firmly. My uncle was murdered because he stood against corruption. I won't run at the first sign of danger. Sheriff Tate sighed. I figured you'd say that. In that case, I'd suggest you both stay here tonight, doors locked, and keep that scattergun of Sam's close at hand. He tipped his hat. I'll have a deputy keep an eye on the house, but my men can't be everywhere. After he left, Adam checked all the doors and windows, placing Samuel's shotgun within easy reach in the study. Marianne moved through the house lighting lamps, unwilling to sit in darkness and wait for trouble to find them. We should take shifts sleeping, Adam suggested. I'll take the first watch. Marianne nodded, though she doubted she could sleep with danger so near. As she prepared a pot of coffee in the kitchen, the back door suddenly burst open and two masked men rushed in. Marianne screamed, dropping the coffee pot, which shattered on the floor. One of the intruders lunged for her, but she dodged, sending a chair crashing into his path. The second man pulled a knife, advancing more cautiously. Adam appeared in the doorway, revolver in hand. "Drop it," he commanded. Instead, the knife-wielding man threw his weapon with deadly accuracy. Adam twisted away, but the blade sliced across his upper arm. He fired, the shot deafeningly loud in the confined space. The first intruder went down with a cry of pain, clutching his leg. The second man charged Adam, tackling him before he could fire again. They crashed into the dining room, grappling for control of the gun. Marianne searched frantically for a weapon, finally seizing a heavy iron skillet from the stove. As the struggle brought the men back into the kitchen, she swung the skillet with all her strength, connecting solidly with the attacker's head. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Adam scrambled to his feet, blood soaking his sleeve, and trained his revolver on the wounded man who was still conscious. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "Go to hell," the man spat, though pain contorted his features. Adam cocked the hammer of his revolver. "Wrong answer, try again." The man's eyes darted nervously between Adam's face and the gun. "It was just supposed to be a warning. Scare the woman, rough her up a little. Nobody was supposed to die. Blackridge sent you." Adam pressed. Before the man could answer, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Moments later, Sheriff Tate burst through the front door, revolver drawn. "In the kitchen," Marianne called. The sheriff took in the scene two downed attackers, Adam bleeding, Marianne with the skillet still clutched in her hands. "Looks like you didn't need my help after all," he remarked dryly. Within the hour, the unconscious man had regained his senses, and both attackers were locked in the town jail. Neither would admit to working for Blackridge directly, claiming they had been hired by an intermediary who had since left town. Dr. Matthews, summoned to treat Adam's wound, pronounced it painful but not serious. "Keep it clean and try not to get yourself stabbed again for at least a week," he advised as he finished bandaging the arm. When they were finally alone again, Marianne insisted on making Adam comfortable in the parlor while she cleaned up the mess in the kitchen. The events of the evening had left her shaken but also strangely exhilarated. She had faced violence and fear, and instead of crumbling, she had fought back. "You were magnificent," Adam said when she joined him by the fire, handing him a fresh cup of coffee. "Not many women or men, for that matter, would have kept their wits about them like that." "I surprised myself," she admitted, settling beside him on the sofa. "I've never hit anyone before." "You've got a good swing," he said with a small grin. My head is grateful it wasn't on the receiving end." Their laughter faded into comfortable silence. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows and sending occasional gusts down the chimney that made the fire dance. "Adam," Marianne said softly, "thank you for protecting me." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "I made a promise to your uncle to keep you safe, but even without that—" He hesitated, searching for words. "Marianne, I know we've only known each other for 2 days, but I feel as though we've known each other much longer," she finished for him. He nodded. "Is that foolish?" "If it is, then we're both fools," she said, her heart racing as she held his gaze. "I've never felt so connected to anyone before." Adam reached out, hesitantly touching her cheek with calloused fingers. "In my experience, life doesn't often give second chances. When my wife to be left, I thought that was it for me. I never expected to feel this way again." Marianne leaned into his touch. "Nor I. Boston seems a lifetime away now." "This isn't exactly the life you were accustomed to," Adam said, a hint of doubt in his voice. "Wallace is rough around the edges, dangerous as you've seen." "It's also beautiful and honest in a way Boston never was," she replied. "The people here Jacob misses. Donovan, even the miners I met today, they're real in a way the society I left behind wasn't." Adam's hand moved to the nape of her neck, drawing her gently closer. "You could have a place here if you wanted it, not just as Sam's niece but as yourself. Is that what you want?" She whispered, their faces now inches apart. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time," he admitted, then closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but quickly deepened with a hunger that surprised them both. Marianne's hands found their way to his shoulders, careful of his injured arm while his fingers tangled in her hair, loosening pins until it fell in waves down her back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I should apologize for taking liberties, but I'm not sorry." "Nor am I," she said, smiling up at him. "Though Mrs. Donovan will certainly have something to say about my appearance if she walks in now." Adam chuckled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We should probably try to get some rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges with this marshal arriving." Reluctantly, they separated. Adam insisted on taking the first watch, promising to wake her in a few hours. As Marianne climbed the stairs to her bedroom, her fingers touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. Despite the danger surrounding them, despite the uncertainty of the future, she felt more alive than she ever had in Boston. She fell asleep thinking of blue eyes and strong hands, of mountains and silver, and of a future she had never imagined but now couldn't stop dreaming about. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Marianne's window, waking her from a deep sleep. She sat up with a start, realizing that Adam had never woken her for her shift. Hastily dressing, she hurried downstairs to find him asleep in an armchair, the shotgun across his lap. As if sensing her presence, he woke immediately, hand tightening on the weapon before his eyes focused on her. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "I was just resting my eyes." "You were supposed to wake me," she chided gently. He shrugged, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his injured arm. "You needed the rest more than I did." Their gazes held for a moment, both remembering the previous night's kiss. A flush crept up Marianne's cheeks, but before either could speak, Mrs. Donovan bustled in from the kitchen. "There you are. Breakfast is ready and Sheriff Tate is here again. Says the stage is coming in early today." She eyed Adam's disheveled appearance and the shotgun with disapproval but said nothing as she retreated to the kitchen. The sheriff confirmed that the stage coach from Boys was expected within the hour, bringing Marshal Donovan and, hopefully, the evidence needed to move against Blackridge. "Those two thugs we caught last night are still not talking," he told them over breakfast. But Blackridge was seen leaving town at dawn, heading toward his mine in the next valley. Could be coincidence, could be he's running scared. Or setting up something worse, Adam said grimly. "We should meet the stage, make sure the marshal gets to town safely." They rode down to the stage depot just as the coach was arriving in a cloud of dust. The passengers disembarked a traveling salesman, a young couple, and finally a tall, imposing man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and a U.S. Marshal's badge pinned to his vest. "Marshal Donovan," Adam approached, extending his hand. "I'm Adam Jensen. This is Marianne Parker, Samuel's niece." The marshals shook their hands firmly. "James Donovan, sorry about your uncle, Miss Parker. He was a fine man, and we were close to breaking this case wide open when he died." They escorted him to the sheriff's office, where, behind closed doors, he opened his satchel and spread out documents on the desk. "Sam Parker contacted me about 6 months ago with suspicions about Blackridge's operations. We've been building a case ever since evidence of safety violations, bribery of officials, intimidation, and now, it seems, murder." He pulled out a wanted poster. "This is Thomas Whitman, also known as Dynamite Whitman. He's wanted in 3 territories for sabotage and murder. Specializes in making mine accidents happen. Last known location was right here in Wallace, working at the Silver Crescent." Marianne studied the rough sketch on the poster. "The timing fits perfectly with my uncle's death. We traced Whitman to Denver last week," Marshal Donovan continued. "He was arrested for drunken brawling and started talking, hoping for leniency. Said he'd been hired by Cornelius Blackridge personally to ensure Sam Parker had a fatal accident." "That's the evidence we needed," Sheriff Tate said, "but Blackridge has already fled town." "Not far enough," the marshal said grimly. "I've got deputies watching all the roads and the train stations. He won't escape justice." "What about the Silver Crescent?" Marianne asked. "Even with Blackridge gone, there are still his partners, his company." "That's where the rest of your uncle's evidence comes in," Marshal Donovan explained. "With the documentation he gathered, we can prove that Blackridge Mining has been operating illegally, bribing officials for claims that should have been open to fair bidding. The government will likely seize many of their assets, leaving the miners without work," Marianne mused. Adam studied her thoughtfully. "You're thinking about the cooperative idea again, aren't you?" she nodded. "If the miners could form an association, perhaps they could take over some of the operations. My uncle's mine is already profitable and well run. It could serve as a model." Marshal Donovan looked impressed. "That's not a bad idea, Miss Parker. There'd be legal hurdles, but with the right backing. I believe my uncle left sufficient funds to help with such an enterprise," Marianne said. "It would be a fitting memorial to his work." Their planning was interrupted by the arrival of a deputy, breathless with news. "Blackridge has been spotted heading back toward town with about a dozen armed men. They're coming up the South Road." Sheriff Tate swore under his breath. "Looks like he's decided to take matters into his own hands." "We need to evacuate the town," Marshal Donovan said immediately. "Get women and children to safety. How many deputies do you have, Sheriff?" "4, counting the one who just came in." "With the 3 of us, that makes 7 against a dozen or more," Adam calculated. "Not good odds." Marianne straightened her shoulders. "The miners. They'll fight for the Silver Crescent for my uncle's memory." "It's too dangerous," Adam began, but she cut him off. "This is my fight too, Adam. My uncle died for this mine, for these people. I won't hide while others risk their lives." A slow smile spread across his face. "Sam Parker would be proud of you," he turned to the sheriff. "Jacob Miller should be able to gather at least 20 men from the mine. That would give us better odds." "Do it," Sheriff Tate said. "Deputy, ride up to the mine as fast as you can. Tell Jacob we need every man who can handle a gun. Marshal, let's get the townspeople organized." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Women and children were sent to the sturdy church on the north side of town, the furthest building from the south road where Blackridge would enter. Storekeepers barricaded their windows and brought out firearms usually kept hidden beneath counters. Adam insisted on escorting Marianne to the church, though she protested the entire way. "I can handle a rifle," she argued. "My father taught me to shoot when I was 14. "It's not about ability," Adam said, helping her down from her horse. "It's about keeping you safe if something happened to you." He trailed off, his expression pained. Marianne took his hand. "Nothing will happen to either of us. We have right on our side." He squeezed her fingers. "Right doesn't stop bullets, Marianne. Promise me you'll stay here, at least until we know what we're dealing with." Reluctantly, she agreed, watching him ride back toward the center of town. Around her, women comforted frightened children while pretending their own fear didn't exist. Marianne found herself admiring their quiet strength. She had been in the church less than 10 minutes when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats. Looking out a window, she saw Jacob Miller leading 24 miners down the main street, rifles and pickaxes at the ready. The men from the Silver Crescent had arrived. Unable to remain idle while others fought for her uncle's legacy, Marianne slipped out a side door. If she couldn't fight, she could at least bear witness to what happened. Making her way along back alleys, she positioned herself in the shadow of the assayer's office, where she could see the south entrance to town. The wait wasn't long. Soon, a group of riders appeared on the horizon, moving at a steady trot toward Wallace. At their head rode Cornelius Blackridge, his silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. The men with him were hard-faced and heavily armed. In the center of town, Sheriff Tate, Marshal Donovan, Adam, and the miners had formed a line across the main street. As Blackridge's group approached, they halted at the edge of town, clearly surprised to find opposition waiting. "Cornelius Blackridge." Marshal Donovan's voice carried clearly in the tense silence. "I have a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, murder, bribery, and fraud. Surrender peacefully and your men can ride away." Blackridge's laugh was cold. "One marshal and a bunch of dirt-grubbing miners, I think not." He turned to his men. "Clear them out." Before anyone could move, a shot rang out from a second-floor window of the hotel. One of Blackridge's men tumbled from his horse, clutching his shoulder. Suddenly, the street erupted in gunfire. Marianne watched in horror as men fell on both sides. Adam was in the thick of the fight, his revolver blazing as he ducked from cover to cover. Sheriff Tate took a bullet to the leg, but continued firing from behind a water trough. Blackridge, seeing his men outmatched by the determined defenders, wheeled his horse around and galloped down a side street directly toward where Marianne was hiding. Without thinking, she stepped into his path, Samuel's shotgun, which she had taken from the house, leveled at his chest. "Stop right there, Mr. Blackridge," she commanded, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. His horse reared in surprise, and Blackridge fought to control the animal. His eyes narrowed as he recognized her. "Miss Parker, how unfortunate. I had hoped to leave you out of this unpleasantness." "The way you left my uncle out of it," she retorted. "Dismount, please. The marshal wants to speak with you." Blackridge's hand moved toward his jacket, where Marianne was certain he carried a concealed weapon. "I don't think so, my dear. In fact, I think you'll be coming with me as insurance for my safe passage." "I wouldn't," came Adam's voice from behind him. "Drop your gun, Blackridge, it's over." Blackridge froze, then slowly raised his hands. "Jensen, always interfering in matters that don't concern you." "Marianne concerns me very much," Adam said, moving to stand beside her. As did her uncle. Now get down or I'll put a bullet in you right here. With a snarl of rage, Blackridge suddenly kicked his horse forward, directly at Marianne. Adam shoved her aside, firing as he moved. Blackridge toppled from the saddle, a red stain spreading across his expensive coat. The gunfire in the main street had stopped. Marshal Donovan and several miners came running at the sound of Adam's shot, arriving just as Adam was helping Marianne to her feet. "Are you hurt?" he asked anxiously, checking her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him. "Just a bit shaken." Marshal Donovan knelt beside Blackridge, checking for signs of life. "He's gone," he pronounced, rising. "Shot through the heart." Adam holstered his revolver. "He gave me no choice." "No one's blaming you," the marshal said. "The man was wanted for murder. He chose his end." He turned to Marianne. "Miss Parker, I thought you were supposed to be at the church with the other women." She lifted her chin. "It seems I'm more my uncle's niece than I realized, Marshal." The aftermath of the gunfight was grim. 3 townsmen dead, including one of the sheriff's deputies, and several wounded. On Blackridge's side, 4 men had been killed, including Blackridge himself, and the rest had surrendered when they saw their leader fall. As the town doctor tended to the wounded, Marianne moved among them, offering what comfort she could. She found Jacob Miller having a bullet removed from his arm, stoically refusing whiskey for the pain. "Miss Parker," he greeted her with a strained smile. "Did I hear right that you faced down Blackridge yourself?" "Foolishly," she admitted. "But it seems to run in the family." Jacob chuckled, then winced as the doctor probed for the bullet. "Your uncle would be proud." The men were saying the same. "Sam's niece has his spine," they're saying. "I've been thinking about the mine," Marianne told him. "About the future. How would the men feel about forming a cooperative, owning shares in the operation rather than simply working for wages?" Jacob's eyes widened. "It's a fine idea, miss, but most miners don't have the money to buy in, and the equipment, the infrastructure at all costs. My uncle left me considerable funds," she said. "I believe he would want them used to secure the miners' future. We could structure it so that men earn their shares through work as well as investment." "It could work," Jacob said thoughtfully, "with the right management, with you as foreman and perhaps Adam to help with the business side of things." She paused. "If he's willing, of course." She found Adam later at Samuel Parker's house, his arm freshly bandaged where he had taken a grazing shot during the fight. He was sitting in her uncle's study, looking exhausted but relieved. "It's really over," he said as she entered. "Marshal Donovan says with Whitman's testimony and your uncle's evidence, Blackridge Mining will be dismantled. The government will auction off most of the assets." "I told Jacob about my idea for the cooperative," Marianne said, taking the seat opposite him. "He thinks it could work." Adam studied her face. "You're serious about staying then, about making a life here?" "I am," she said simply. "There's nothing for me in Boston now. Everything I want is here in Wallace." His eyes darkened. "Everything," Marianne rose, moving to stand beside his chair. "Everything," she repeated softly. Adam pulled her gently onto his lap, mindful of his injuries. "I have nothing to offer you but a small cabin, a few horses, and a life that will never be as comfortable as what you knew in Boston." "You're wrong," she said, touching his face tenderly. "You offer honesty, courage, and a heart that matches my own. That's worth more than all the comforts of the East." His kiss was gentle but filled with promise. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Your uncle once told me that the measure of a man isn't in what he owns but in what he builds. I'd like to build something with you, Marianne. A life, a family, a future." "I'd like that too," she whispered. "Very much." They were married 3 months later in the same church that had sheltered the townswomen during the confrontation with Blackridge. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which lasted well into the night. Jacob Miller, now recovered from his wound and serving as the first president of the Silver Crescent Miners Cooperative, gave the bride away in Samuel Parker's stead. By then, Marshal Donovan had completed his investigation, confirming that Samuel had indeed been murdered on Blackridge's orders. Thomas Whitman was serving a life sentence in the territorial prison, and Blackridge's former associates were either in jail or had fled the territory. The Silver Crescent mine continued to produce rich ore, but now the profits were shared among those who worked the claim. Marianne used her inheritance to improve safety conditions and to build a school for the miners' children, where she occasionally taught when the regular teacher needed assistance. Adam and Marianne made their home in Samuel Parker's house, though they spent summers at Adam's cabin in the mountains, away from the heat and dust of the town. It was there, a year after their wedding, that their first child was born, a boy they named Samuel, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. As the years passed, Wallace grew and prospered. The Silver Crescent Miners Cooperative became a model for other mining communities throughout the West. Adam and Marianne added 2 more children to their family, a daughter, Elizabeth, and another son, William. On the 5th anniversary of her arrival in Wallace, Marianne stood at the gates that had once been closed against her, remembering the blizzard that had nearly claimed her life and the man who had saved her. Adam joined her there, their children playing nearby under the watchful eye of Mrs. Donovan, who had become like a grandmother to them. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked, his arm around her waist. "Staying in Wallace, marrying a rough frontier scout instead of some cultured Boston gentleman," Marianne laughed, turning in his embrace to face him. The years had added a few lines around his eyes, a touch of gray at his temples, but to her he was more handsome than ever. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. My life began when that storm forced me to your door." "Our door now," he reminded her, gesturing toward the town that had become their home. "And our lives." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Marianne reflected on the journey that had brought her west. She had come seeking only to settle her uncle's affairs, never imagining she would find love, purpose, and a community that embraced her as one of their own. The gates of Wallace stood open now, welcoming travelers from all directions. And beyond those gates, Marianne had found not just shelter from a storm, but a love that would weather any tempest life might bring.